Hello there, everyone. Everybody can see me okay. Thank you very much for attending today's webinar. For those of you who are new to this, my name is Kristina Kuprina, and I'm the Chief Economist and the Portfolio Manager at Sequoia Wealth Advisors. And we do these webinars about once a month, a little bit of an update on the economy as well as topics of interest, sometimes with a guest speaker, sometimes you're stuck with me for the whole hour. With that being said, we got a tremendous amount of registrants for this one, clearly a topic of interest to many people. So I'm going to split this webinar into two parts. Part one, I'm going to talk a bit about the one big beautiful bill that recently passed. Don't shoot the messenger, I didn't name it. That's its name. For the interest of brevity, a lot of times I'll just call it the OBBB. But that being said, that's the big bill that just passed through Congress and the White House, and there is a lot in it. The second part, roughly, depending on the number of questions, I'll do a brief update on the economy and touch upon a lot of questions I had around Fed and Fed independence and interest rates, because that was another one we got a lot of questions on. That being said, just a couple housekeeping items. One is, if you have any questions, be sure to post them earlier rather than later. If I cover it, it's okay. I'll address it and we'll go on. The reason for that is I don't like to get to the very end and I didn't have a chance to answer everybody's question. For those of you who sent questions in advance, I have them here and I will answer them all. So when you watch the recording later, you will get your answers. With that being said, a couple of other notes, again, for those of you who are new or watching this, I'm here just to go over the bill, what's in it, kind of talk about some specifics as they tie to economic and or financial planning interests. I'm not here to take a position on whether it's a good bill or a bad bill, or the policies are good policies or bad policies. That could be a matter of opinion, political, personal, social. Also, it could be how it impacts you personally. So the one thing to keep in mind with all of this is none of these items in this bill or any other policy that comes in Washington is something that can be seen in isolation. Each one impacts other parts of most people's financial planning, and it is something to take in consideration with a whole picture rather than a specific policy and or item. So that being said, just take everything as informational at this point, not a planning decision. Second point is the bill's just passed. Generally, what will happen is the IRS and the Treasury and other departments will fine-tune the ruling and the specifics in it. So some things that may be said today are not 100% slushed out exactly what it's going to look like and how you would do it. So keep this as the first of many talks that we'll have on this, and we'll also be posting information on our website and sending it out as we get more details in this bill. The final one, the regulators like me to say to this to you, nothing I'm saying today should be construed as individualized advice or recommendations, as each individual situation is unique. And you definitely want to speak to us individually or to your financial professionals for personalized guidance. With that being said, again, don't forget to send in your questions. And without further ado, we will get into the one big beautiful bill. I'll start with this. There's a lot of information on the media that is not correct. It is oftentimes very partisanly directed, so information is kind of positioned in a way to feed a specific political viewpoint. Or again, worst case scenarios or best case scenarios are positioned as news as well as opinions. And that can make it very complicated for the average person to know, is this something I need to be concerned about? Is this something I should take action on? Is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? Not just myself, but what about other family members or people in my life? So this is why individualized financial planning is so incredibly important in all of this, because one action that could look really good would mean you want to do 3 or 4 other things here just to optimize that. And the other thing too is this is federal law. So state and local tax policies can also have a big impact as well. So keep that in mind. Because we have clients all over the place, I'm going to give, much of this is going to be very, federal focused rather than state, but I will bring up specific things, especially around California, where most of our clients are, just as considerations as well. With that being said, let's jump into it. So in no particular order, here's some of the big highlights of the bill. And I'm going to try to go through this relatively quickly with the facts, figures, and data and get into kind of more examples. So it's kind of more connective and it's not just a lot of numbers and information. But the big one many people probably know is it extends the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and the various tax brackets that got put into place in 2017. I won't go too far into detail with that, but that is not changed and that will continue on. A big one, and especially for our California clients, is SALT. So SALT, the state and local tax deduction, has been a big thing. And when it was cut to $10,000 under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, that really impacted a lot of filers, especially in the high tax states. Our clients in New York and California really were impacted by that. Well, the SALT cap is now back up to 40,000. The 40,000 does phase out though with income. So if you make over $500,000 a year, this does not apply to you. You will not get that state and local deduction any longer. This was very one of the biggest fights in Congress to get this one through. Obviously, states that are more impacted fought very hard for it, and eventually this compromise came. So again, above 500,000 doesn't help you. Below $500,000, it's a $40,000. The SALT, it goes $40,000. The big ones that were talked about a lot is the child tax credit. So that's going to go up from, I have to look at my notes because I haven't memorized all of this quite yet. It's going up to $2,500. Okay. That does go through 2028. So one thing I want to stress is that each one of these new policies or extensionable policies, some have sunset dates and some don't. I'm not necessarily going to go into all of the sunset dates here because quite frankly, as the next administration comes in, they're going to have their own policy anyway. So even if it goes on forever, it's still, nothing is forever in the world of Washington policy. But the child tax credit increases, and that was a big question a lot of people asked about. The deductions for tips and overtime. That's another one where there was a lot of information that came out. Again, the media was a little bit different. So I want to kind of explain how these work on, again, a high level, just to understand them. So for the tips, workers that are earning under $150,000 a year, okay, so individual under $150,000 a year, you could deduct up to $25,000 in tip income. I want to stress that it is traditional tip income. There was a lot of guardrails put in to prevent situations where people would reclassify their income. The same goes for the overtime, which I'll get into in a moment. So that means so your income is up to that level, but then the tips above that are now deductible. For the vast majority of tip earning workers, that's going to be sufficient for that. So understand it is a deduction, it is not a credit, so you actually have to be paying taxes to get this. Again, with the caveat, consult with your tax advisors for the specific here, but that's one what got a lot of, again, information in the media, back and forth, different ways of describing it. That's the end result of it. That also does phase out in 2028. On overtime, now what I have to stress about overtime is it's not your entirety of your overtime income. It is the excess. So if you're making $20 an hour and your overtime is $30 an hour, this applies to the overtime portion, not the traditional wages. But it's $12,500 for individual, $25,000 per couple. Again, phase out on this one, $150,000 for individual. I think it's $300,000, yes, per couple. So I'm going to stop and give a little bit of examples here just for a moment. So again, not me just running through a list. Where this has a big impact is really when we start looking at what jobs do. It's jobs that traditionally have a lot of overtime. Could be really benefit from this quite a bit. I'm saying police, firefighters, and things like that. There's a lot of other professions where overtime is at. It's just that extra money that you're earning is applies to this. Again, not the entirety of your wages. All of the reason for the income caps, because some people push back a little bit and say, well, that's not fair, I earn more than that. The reason the income caps is that there was a really big push not to have this be tax cuts for the wealthy. That was a really big political talking point on both sides of the aisle. And the idea is that we're really trying to help the average working American. We're not trying to help people that make a certain amount of money. Now you can argue, some jobs, police and firefighters, they do make really good money and they provide an essential public service. So the reason again for having this is just really trying to make sure that this was not seen as a tax cut for people in the higher income levels. The challenge, of course, is the federal looks at this as a national number, what is a average wage in California is very different than an average wage, say, in Missouri, right? So there's a lot of differential there. States may come up with their own forms of this or additions or modifications to it as well. So we'll see that. Let's see, the other big one, senior tax break. Seems very, very vague, but ultimately is that seniors at 65 years or older that are collecting Social Security. So I want to bring that attention up. Not everybody collects Social Security at 65. In fact, a lot of people don't. So if you're not collecting Social Security, the above will not apply to you. $6,000 additional deduction in addition to the standard deduction, which I'll get into in a moment. It does phase out for an individual over 75,000 adjusted gross income. So this is important to understand. That's not a high number in some of the more expensive states. So it does have a phase out, 150,000 for a joint. Now I'm going to get into really quickly and hop over to standard deduction because I'll tie into this. So the standard deduction is something that went up and went into effect really at a higher level on the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that took effect in 2017. Now individual is 15,750, a couple or joint filers 31,500. So the standard deduction's gone up. That has been a really big game changer for a lot of people's taxes, is not needing to itemize. The majority of Americans no longer need to itemize because the standard deduction is so high. And that is something that's really made a big difference in a lot of average filers' taxes. But when you combine these things together, the consideration with this is in a planning world is what steps can you do to keep your income at a certain level if the benefits of the tax, that's called the senior tax break, is greater than what you would get elsewhere. So this is where it's going to be a really big planning thing. Is it worth working to keep your income below the 75 or 150 to get this tax break, or would you get more benefit being a higher income and giving that up because there'd be something greater outside? This is why individual planning is so critically important. Never look at things in isolation. Don't chase the senior deduction at the expense of other potentially more beneficial ideas. Looking at this may affect decisions like Roth conversions, like selling appreciated securities, real estate, etc., and timing that out before you start to collect Social Security. Again, individual planning things. One little wrinkle with that is something that's really hit charitable giving a lot is with the higher standard deduction. There was less tax benefit for people making charitable contributions. And that's actually, they've added on another element that you can donate. It's not a tremendous amount, but every dollar matters, right? 1,000 individual, 2,000 for a couple to charity in addition to your standard deduction. Now that is only for people in a certain income level. Above that, you lose it. So less incentive for the wealthier, more incentive for the people below these income levels to make donations to charitable. Another important wrinkle is that is only cash, not stock. So again, for those of you that are very charitably inclined and like to give money charity, this is another strategy. What is the most optimal way to get the organizations the money they need to maximize also your tax benefits? I already can tell you we're just starting to scratch the surface, all the strategies that we're going to use around this. Excuse me. Okay, so I covered that. Do that one last because it's more detailed. Auto loan interest deductions, up to $10,000 a year. For US, I think it's US assembled, that's the rule, yes. US assembled vehicles can be deducted if your income's below 100,000 for individual or 200,000 filing jointly. The purchases have to happen between 2025 and 2028 unless it gets extended. One important thing, I didn't pull it up here and I have not confirmed this. So use this as a possible, I just didn't have a chance to double check this information. There may be specific vehicles that qualify and don't qualify. So it is not all vehicles purchased. So my recommendation is that if this will benefit you, to talk to us, we will have the information by the time you talk to us and or confirm that the vehicle is covered, because we wouldn't want you to go out and buy a vehicle based on this credit and find out it was not one of the approved vehicles for this program. The one only note that I had here was US Assemble, but there are some other factors that go into that as well. I'm going to take a little breather. I don't see any new questions from the ones that have already come, so please send them if you have them. Maybe I'm covering everything. That would be perfect. I'm going to very high level touch upon the company benefits that are really, there's tremendous numbers of new deductions and tax benefits for small businesses. Interestingly, a small business now is any business making 75 million or below. So definition of small business has gone up from 50 million to 75 million, but there's tremendous amounts of benefits and credits. And the idea of this is to be stimulative and supportive to small businesses. And there's, again, a list I won't go into in depth here just because I'm not sure of the audience and how many are business owners. But I have the full report on the business side of things. Happy to share it with anyone who's interested for the details. But a big one that you're going to see is going to be the fact that you can immediately expense R&D costs and other short-lived asset costs. This is a huge game changer for a lot of, and this is not capped out by the company size. This is a huge game changer and is going to go into the economic portion when I talk about what companies and sectors are likely to do well under this. But taking off that limitation that was put on in recent years and really just opening up companies being able to expense a lot more R&D and a lot more short-term expenses is going to have a significant impact on certain companies, publicly traded as well as private. This one less important here, but any of you that are doing estate planning and making a decision whether you gift now or gift later for tax efficiency, the estate tax exemption has gone up to 15 million per individual, 30 million for a couple. That being said, it's not a huge jump from where it was previously, but that is something to consider because in recent years, for many years, that number has jumped around so much, has made people's estate planning very, very complicated. There were some years it was as low as 3 million. Some years it was everything, like any estate transfer. Other years there was no cap. It was a very volatile number that made estate planning incredibly complicated. And why this matters is that you may say, well, you know, it's 3 million, we're fine. Well, if you own a house in California and a few retirement accounts, half of that will go to the government upon your passing. It's not generally optimal. People wanting to pass more money on to kids, to organizations, they have to do preemptive planning. That will get a lot easier for the vast majority going forward because of that one. Let's see, so many things in here. I'm trying to get to the okay, let's talk about things. This is going to sound like a little bit nuanced, but this is ones that have some things coming up pretty quickly here. So we'll talk a little bit about, I'm not sure what I want to technically call this. Let's just call them green energy programs, for lack of a better term. It may not be the official name for them. But on the federal level, things like tax credits for purchasing of electric vehicles. Things like tax credits or I can't think of the word for it, but basically credits of also not just tax, but credits back for doing things that make your home more energy efficient, solar and things like that. So there's been many layers of these types of subsidies or credits or programs at a local, state, and federal level, and they've been shifting throughout the years. Well, at the federal level, a lot of it's phasing out. And there's so many different programs. It would take the entirety of this webinar to go over all of them. So I'm just going to talk about the high level ones. And again, if you want the full report, let me know. But if you're considering purchasing an electric vehicle, on the federal level, it's going to phase out at the end of September. So it's really important that if you're looking to do that, make sure your income level qualifies you. Okay, because there's an income cap, and make sure the vehicle you want to purchase qualifies because it's something like 55,000 or less. But if all these things factor in and you're considering purchasing an electric vehicle and looking for the federal tax credit, September 30th is a cutoff date on that. There's other things like putting in chargers and doing other energy efficient things on your home that are phasing out at the end of the year. So this is really important. If this is in the cards in your planning, this is something you've been considering doing, definitely look into this and find out what, if anything, you need to do and timing you need to do. In some situations, it has to be fully installed. In other situations, it just has to be completed by a later date, but started by this date. So again, any of these things are important to you, or things you're considering on the federal side of things, you definitely want to get started earlier rather than later. So I'm trying to jump into all of these aspects here. Okay, let's get into the, again, don't shoot the messenger, I didn't name it, but we'll talk a little bit about the Trump accounts for children. Okay, now I just want to take a moment here and say, I personally don't like it when politicians name stuff after themselves. because we're just in an environment where people are very politically charged. And the minute you're going to put Obamacare on it, which I didn't like either, or Trump accounts, it just gets people kind of all, tense. In fact, they did an interesting study shortly after Obamacare came in, and they asked a question somewhere along the lines of, what do you feel about Obamacare? Something like that. And obviously the results came back and it was very politically motivated. Like most Republicans didn't like it, most Democrats liked it. And they asked the question again, they said, what do you feel about the Affordable Care Act? And most people liked it. Same thing, different name. So that being said, yeah, I'm not a fan of politicians naming stuff after themselves, but the reality is that's what they're called. So for brevity, I'll just call them the TAs for now. Trump accounts for kids. This is actually pretty cool from a planning perspective, okay? And the reason I say that is they're kind of like custodial IRAs. So there's something been around in a different form for a while and almost nobody ever used them. But this one's a little bit more incentivized. And so I'm going to give you a high level on this because it's something we're already getting ready, setting up for clients. So, and getting everything put in place. What this is that this can be used. So for children born from 2025 on, the federal government will kick in the first $1,000. Okay. The family, yourselves, anyone who wants to can contribute an additional up to $5,000 a year. This is tax deferred money. Okay, so that money goes in. It's tax deferred money in the account level, and it grows. And when the kids are 18, it becomes essentially an IRA. Okay, they can pull it out though without tax penalty for certain things. I don't have the entirety of the list here, but there are things like first home purchase, for education, housing, entrepreneurship. There's a whole list. I feel like that the specifics of what it can be used for and the definitions and if there's any limits, that's going to be determined by IRS in the coming months. So we don't have all the specifics, but again, it's so early in the process, you probably don't need to know. But it's really cool. An employer can also put up to $2,500 in there. Again, the cap's still $5,000 a year. If the employer puts more, the second part is not tax deferred. But this is a really cool way of helping to, another vehicle for helping to save for your kid's future that can really be a complement to a 529 plan. While this can be used for education, it can also be used for other things. So it's a really cool vehicle. There are very big limits on what the money can be invested in, which I'm hoping for a little bit more clarity on because I can see a little bit of issues with the limitations right now. So currently it has to be invested in US stocks in an index fund, low cost, simple investment, which may make a lot of sense for young kids far from needing the money. However, when they get closer to maybe taking that money out for their entrepreneurial project or for their home or something like that, I'm hoping that's going to be expanded into at least providing some conservative options because we wouldn't want the money bouncing around in the stock market when that takes place. These accounts will be held at your traditional brokerage firms or with your financial advisors. They're not accounts that you'd be holding in the bank or anything like that. So very much like an IRA account. But why I think it's cool, again, any way that we can help people save for their kids and their futures and add money to it in tax advantage ways is a good thing, for the future, for the long term. And again, we'll get more specifics on that later, but just another, tax planning idea as well as kids savings idea. Let's see. So I'm touching upon a lot of stuff. I really feel like I'm a little bit maybe scattered on how I'm doing it because there's so much in this bill. And I wanted to focus on where I was getting the most questions from clients. And there's a lot that people don't know yet. And I think, again, the complexities is just passed. A lot of it is not, really out there in the general public because usually people get this information towards year end or when they're doing their taxes. Again, the other thing, the complexity is the media and having a political bent one way or the other. So you're getting information that's half truth, partial truth, and whatnot. And the final one is that, as I mentioned earlier, not all this applies to all people, and not all of it's even really something that you'd want to pursue. Like I said, would you want to bring your income down to get this tax credit here if something else is more beneficial outside of that? And it kind of reminds me a lot of the complexity around planning as people are getting close to taking Social Security and going close to going on Medicare. So it's really important when you're getting close to Medicare, when you're about 62, if not 60, but at least by 62 at the latest, you really, really, really want to carefully manage your income from 62 to 65 to avoid having a very high Medicare premium. And sometimes that's controllable, sometimes that's not, but people that don't have good financial planning and guidance and advice sometimes take on they retire and then they sell some stock or they sell a property, and it blows everything up. So planning in advance, because we're thinking about the long-term effects of the cost of Medicare, is really, really important. And if you know that, you can say, oh, okay, well, I'm going to do this house sale here, or I'm going to do this transfer here. I'm going to do things more efficiently because over time it's going to save me more money. So again, nothing in isolation. So I'm going to take a moment just to check questions here. So again, send them over if you have them. And also if you feel like I should go deeper with anything that I mentioned, or if you've heard something on the news and you're like, wait, I heard it this way. What's the difference? So ask. So I'm going to start with the most recent questions. So only $1,000 charitable giving can be deducted from income for individual. This is the new addition with this rule. There are other ways to deduct charitable giving, and it depends on your specific situation. So I know who posted this question, so I can answer that for you personally, just not in a public forum. Yes, there are other ways to get deductions charitably. This is just an addition, an add-on, because it impacted a lot of charitable organizations when the standard deduction became so high that people didn't benefit as much from additional deductions for charitable giving. But yes, there are still ways that you can do it. You are not limited as an individual. You just wouldn't get the extra goodie that's in this specific addition to from the bill. The question, capital gains percentages for individuals. Question on that one is, I'm not quite sure the context of this. Nothing has changed with the taxation of capital gains in this new bill. So it will be the same as it was before, which on average is 15 to 20% for long-term gains and your ordinary rate for short-term gains. Again, a lot of exceptions and exemptions to that depending on the type of asset. So this is definitely a specific individualized planning here. There wasn't a big change with that. In the case of selling property, it's pretty much the same thing. Nothing changed with the federal $250,000 basically tax deduction or exemption. I actually confuse the two words sometimes. When you sell a property, currently an individual will get a deduction on the first $250,000 in gains, and a couple will get $500,000. That has not changed on that. Now, I want to stress that is the federal tax, not the state tax. So if you're selling your house in California, you still could have a potential big hit. Anytime you're selling property, it is a really good idea to consult with your financial planners, with us, or with your tax professional to know what your specific situation will look like, because that transaction is not in isolation of everything else going on. And I'll give you an example. Not only are brackets going to have an impact, so maybe you're kind of cruising around because under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that took place in 2017, that 24% bracket captured a lot more people. It reduced a lot of people's taxes in that mid-income level. And that's, people got used to it. So those are my taxes, and all of a sudden they sell a bunch of stock, or they had a big income year that year, or they sell property, and all of a sudden they're not in the 24% anymore. Now they're 28, 32, like they get in the high brackets, and everything goes up, not just the one transaction. So you can look at the house, you can expect that, and estimate the taxes on that, but it does impact everything else you have going on. And the taxes go up meaningfully on the California state level when you get over 460 or so. And if you hit over $1 million, you pay the mental health tax, which is an additional 1%. So California has a very, very, very progressive tax rate. And there's a lot of add-on taxes at different levels with the idea of taxing the wealthy more. Challenge to that is a lot of people selling a home are not necessarily wealthy. I mean, if you owned a home in California for a little while, you have a significant appreciation. And I'm not just picking on California, just California has higher taxes, so the story is a little different. But you have this appreciation. You sell the home, now you're in the highest tax bracket federally, and the highest tax bracket state-wise. In California, it goes up to 13.1. So you have the highest federal, the highest state, and then California's extra taxes on various levels of income. You can find yourself in a situation of paying well over 40% taxes. So planning is key. Planning is key because if you can know this is coming and help to mitigate in other places, you could potentially reduce your taxes. So can't stress enough on the planning element to this. Another question. What about the work requirements with Medi-Cal? Question mark. Okay, I'm actually going to talk about that later on, so maybe I'll hop over to that one. So a lot of questions came in about you may have heard a part of what's in this bill is the work requirements. So people on Medicaid or Medi-Cal in California, which is the government-sponsored healthcare, is, well, government slash taxpayer sponsored healthcare, but basically healthcare for people that are below a certain income level. One of the big changes that got a lot of press is the requirement for people that don't meet certain requirements that they need to work 20 hours a week or 80 hours a month in order to continue to get the government healthcare, okay, Medicaid slash Medi-Cal. So there was a lot around this. And I'll talk a little bit about this on the economic front of it, because again, enough questions came up, and just another one here. So the requirements are, and maybe I'll go back a little bit to history. So during the pandemic period, we significantly increased the number of people that would qualify under Medicaid slash Medi-Cal. And I want to just bring up the reasons behind this. I believe, let's try to second guess our politicians. We're altruistic, right? You've got a situation, we have a pandemic going on, a lot of people are unemployed, and we want to make sure they can all get good health care, right? So basically the work requirement was taken away. Everyone who applied and qualified by income could get health care. And that was a change. So way back in the Clinton era was the last time we did this big reform on social benefits. It's called welfare reform. It was, I don't remember the official name, but it was kind of the same thing. It was like, if you want benefits, you need to go to work. And there was a lot more onerous actually requirements under the current bill. But that was the time when it was the last time we did that. And then over the years, it's kind of loosened up a little bit and really expanded during the pandemic. And then the idea now is, if you're able to work, if you don't qualify these exemptions, then you need to work. I want to define work though. Work means you need to be in school at least half time. You need to be in a work program. Let's see, you need to be volunteering. So there's a lot of, you can do other things, a trade program like school, education, vocational. There's a lot of exemptions to requirement to work. But basically the idea is contributing some form or another to society or towards your future through education. Who's exempted? Medically certified disabled. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that one in a moment, because that's another potential planning consideration for some people or some of maybe your family members. Disabled veteran, children under 14, if you have dependent children under 14, if you're a foster adult, I guess at that point, under 26, or pregnant. So there's some exemptions of people that will not be required to do the work. I want to talk a little bit about the medically certified disabled. I am not a healthcare professional, an expert in this field by any means. However, there could be a number of people out there that, because anyone who is under a certain income level could get healthcare, never got medically certified as having a disability that would make it difficult or impossible for them to work. So that being said, if you or a family member, someone you know is in that situation, my suggestion would be to go through the process of the healthcare system of getting that diagnosed and certified. Again, I can't explain how or express how to do this, but that would be a really strong consideration, just to be sure that you don't see a cut to your benefits as this takes effect. Because I do believe there would be a number of people that didn't go through that process simply because they didn't need to, but now would need to in order to continue to qualify for benefits. The questions around the economic impact of this. Generally, it's hard to go back to what happened after the last time this happened, again, during the Clinton administration with the welfare reform back then, because we can look at that data and say it actually was economically beneficial. Most people went back to work. The numbers actually were very good, and it was not nearly as onerous as a lot of people predicted. The prediction, children would go hungry, people would starve, and all these bad things would happen, but that didn't play out. However, as you guys all heard in the disclaimers, past performance doesn't guarantee future results. A lot has to do with how the economy is doing and what the employment numbers are like, right? If unemployment stays low and there's a lot of jobs out there, it makes it easier, right? All things being equal. Obviously, everybody's circumstances are different. Everybody's location is different. But if we fall into a recession or a significant downturn or any situation where the unemployment numbers go high, finding work could be almost impossible. So you could potentially see a situation like that in a future recessionary period where some of these restrictions are taken away. There's a little bit more flexibility in the program potentially, because you can want to work all day long, but there's got to actually be jobs out there for you to do. Again, it's too early to say. There's a lot of opinions. I can crunch the data 10 ways to Sunday to show you different ways this could be economically impactful. Nobody truly knows yet. So I wanted to bring all of that up. And, you know, I do want to address the bigger issue with this is the idea that everyone should be able to get health insurance, and it shouldn't be tied to your work or a work requirement or anything else like that. It's a very altruistic way of thinking, and the idea, and you see this in countries that have, say, socialized medicine, right? The plus is everyone gets care. The downside is you may have to wait a very long time for that care, right? Because the systems are so impacted. And that's an issue that's coming up really big in Europe right now, because they've just massively expanded the population and it's a much longer wait period. And so the people who are paying privately in Europe are getting different levels of care than the people on the government healthcare. So very altruistic, already, you know, idea that I completely understand. The challenge is that in order to provide a wider amount of healthcare or more robust healthcare, we also need the infrastructure there. And we kind of see a little bit of example of this in California, whereas they've significantly increased, not only with this federal expansion, right, but also on the state level, have increased the number of people that can use Medi-Cal, including the undocumented, including other population groups. What happened is last year, California had to do an emergency infusion of 2.6 billion. Because a lot more people went into the program than they had anticipated. In addition, it really pushed out wait times because we can't just snap our fingers and grow more doctors. It takes years for them to go to school. It takes a long time to get the infrastructures to expand healthcare. We certainly will need to increase not only the doctors and nurses and nurse practitioners or other professionals, but also the ability and the capacity to care for everyone. So it's kind of a chicken and egg thing. Again, I believe there's a solution for everything. We just have to have that kind of way of thinking to get it done. So I hope I answered, that was a lot of questions about healthcare here in my very fast fashion and looking at that. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just hop into a high level overview on the three big economic topics everyone's asking, and then I'll see if any more new questions come in, and I'll address all the pile of existing questions. So economy, big question here. People say, why is the market doing so well when everything in the world seems so crazy right now? Because the market follows data. In the short term, quite a few have heard this analogy. Markets hate uncertainty, hates uncertainty. Any way, shape, or form hates uncertainty. So the more certainty there is, the more stable things tend to be. The more positive economic data is, things tend to grow. So in any environment, in any administration, in any stage of the cycle, there's always going to be surprises, right? Nobody I know predicted COVID and the lockdown. So you'll have that, and then you'll have things that are normal cyclical events. We're still in the growth cycle, and barring any big shocks to the system, we'll continue to be in that cycle for a while. Some of the, you know, love or hate this administration, some of the policies they put in place are very economically stimulative. Other policies in place are a little bit more, create more uncertainty, right? So the market and the economy is going to be constantly vacillating between strong data, strong consumer, strong company earnings, unpredictable administration. And this is going to continue. We'll have these periods of growth, and we're going to have some volatility. So my age-old reminder, money you need in the short term, not in the stock market. I don't care how well it's doing. All right, just be cautious, because we're going to have times like April. We're going to have these pullbacks here and there because of, again, a lot of the we'll call it uncertainty and new things that are coming forth. So that is a lot of it, why ultimately the market goes to that. So the analogy that many of you have heard, but I use because it's kind of funny, makes sense, at least to me, is many of you know I have wild Mustangs that we've gentled over the last couple of years. Now I can ride them. I ride them all over the place when I'm in Nevada in the mountains. It's my happy place, me and my horse out in the mountains. That being said, horses are prey animals. They're big, they're powerful, they can cause a lot of damage, but they're prey animals, right? They're afraid of things. And horses also too, when something is uncertain, there's an immediate reaction, the prey animal, right? Which is, ah! So I'll be riding on a trail and all of a sudden quail will shoot out of a bush and the horse will go, ah! And it's like, oh, it's quail. You know, just going along, right? So constantly you have to be aware of the surroundings and aware of what your horse sees, which by the way, sees better than you and smells way better than you. So it's always going to know about stuff before you do. But the uncertainty, and then the uncertain becomes certain, and then the horse calms down. That's the stock market. Stock market's like my Mustang, right? Uncertainty. Trump comes out, it's what's that called? Liberation Day. Ah, we're tariffing everybody. And the market goes, ah! And it's like, okay, It's a negotiating ploy. Okay, this is where it worked out. This is getting worked out. But every so often there'll be, oh, we're going to do this tariff. And the market goes, this is going to keep happening. This is the way Trump rolls. Again, love him or hate him, this is his way of doing things. But over time, the market will also become calmer and less reactive to this because it's going to kind of get what is going on. Very much the same thing happened in Trump's first administration when he would go after specific companies and say, and the stock would tank, right? And after a while, the market didn't care when he would do that because it was kind of like, okay, it's just him being Trump, right? So that being said, you'll see less of it, but you'll have new things, and the new things will create new levels of uncertainty. So expect the volatility to continue. Ultimately, what the market's watching most closely is how the economy's doing, how are companies doing, and how's the economy doing, and how's the consumer doing? Because the consumer, as you guys have all heard me say multiple times, is 2/3 of our economy. And if people are spending, if people are working, unemployment's low, the economy will continue to grow. And what tariffs will impact some companies more than others. Most companies are prepared for it. Some companies will get surprised. Some companies have options to shift things. If tariffs are impacting them here, they'll shift over here. Others are much more entrenched. Apple's a great example of that. Apple unwinding itself from China, it's really, 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 really hard. It's so incredibly tied in that. It's going to take them a long time to move things on their supply chain. Whereas, companies that are less impacted, the global supply chain can adapt and adjust more quickly. Tariffs should not be seen in isolation. Costs could be rising over here, but if costs are declining over here, to the consumer, it's a net equal or net even. I use this example a lot for the Californians, Northern Californians. What's your PG&E bills done in recent years? And so for a lot of people, it's gone up 40%. Okay, that's huge inflation. That's your utility bill, right? It's not an option. Yeah, you can do certain things. You can put solar, you can do things to reduce it, but that's part of your inflation story, right? It's your inflation story. What's happening overseas, what's happening in Washington is less impactful than what you have to pay every month. So inflation is local, inflation is personal. And so this impact of tariff-driven inflation or other factor inflation depends on everything. If gas prices are going down, if rents are dropping, if other costs are dropping, well, tariffs or other policies creating rising costs, it's the net at the individual level that's going to influence consumer spending and thus the economy. So hopefully that makes sense of kind of addressing that inflation issue. In recent reports, there's a lot in the news about, oh, inflation's rising again. This was expected last year. We can generally see inflation trends a year in advance. We can't see shock events, but we can generally see overall inflation trends a year in advance. Regardless of who won the election, regardless of policy, we're going to see a little bump in inflation in the second part of this year. When I say little, we're talking basis points here, not even percentages. So the move from 2.4 to 2.7 is meaningless in the scheme of things, but it gets a lot of media attention and a lot of those concerns, like, is this going to get worse? To put it in perspective, in 2022, inflation was up over 9% year over year. Inflation skyrocketed. Okay, right now we're at 2.7, right? It's a big difference. The Fed was aggressively raising rates to try to squish it, right? And now the Fed is in its conundrum of, we really want to lower rates. The Fed wants to lower rates. The rest of the developed world is already lowering rates. Like, we're highest of all. We need to get on it. We need to lower rates. Fed's being cautious because they just want to make sure that the new policy is not going to have a big effect or any other external event. Because what's really, really hard is cutting rates too aggressively too soon can have inflation roaring back. And that's why they're being cautious. They're really trying to be cautious. But they're saying they're probably going to make at least 2 cuts this year, later this year. They're going to test the waters. I would anticipate, if the economy is continuing and growing and strong, I anticipate 0.25%, like 0.5% this year. Any more aggressive cuts than that would be a sign that the economy is weakening, which actually could make everybody more nervous. And I'm going to hop back over to questions here because I realize time is flying. But I'll go into that other question on the economy here, which is about the Fed independence. There's been a lot of noise about that. And I think it's a secret to too many people, but the president has been just pounding on the Fed like, you're an idiot, you need to cut rates and blah, 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 blah. This is actually not as unusual as you would think. almost every administration, Obama did it, Reagan did it, almost every administration, when the rates been pushing the Fed to cut rates because it's stimulative to the economy, right? Stimulative real estate, stimulative. They want the economy to do well. What administration doesn't? They're not usually as noisy about it as Trump's been, but what it's done is it's created a lot of Fed independence, which truly is a huge risk. Like at the minute the Fed is not perceived as being independent, the minute is perceived as being able to be manipulated by threats from Washington, is a really big concern, because that's a lot of what makes our economy strong, and the strongest economy in the world is that separation. I just want to make sure everybody knows that Trump is not going to fire him. He can't. There's a lot more involved in it. He can shout and yell and make a lot of noise, but he's not going to change anything. Also, Powell, the chairman, he can't do policy on his own. There's a bunch of people on the Fed. They all have to vote. One doesn't control it. So this is more noise, political noise, media noise, than it is any true policy concerns. However, Powell is up for reappointment next year, and almost certainly is going to get replaced. That's almost a certainty. I would be very surprised if he didn't. He's been tenured through the first Trump administration, through Biden, but he is coming up for his time next year, and almost certainly, I'm not sure of all the people that are in the running, but there's some really, really good candidates that potentially could be in place. So I'll kind of table that for the future when this is coming up next spring. But I did want to bring that up because there's been a lot of, quite frankly, I don't like to hear it either. Just leave the Fed alone, let them do their thing. But that's just the nature of this administration. All right, I'm gonna hop over to questions here so I get everybody's questions done. Sorry if I miss anyone. I will promise to hop back. I'll get back to you individually if I know who you are. The $2 billion applied for healthcare, where did it come from? And that make costs rise? I don't know exactly what programs. This was a state thing within California. So they took it from other programs, because unlike the federal government, the state actually has to balance their budget every year. So in order to do this emergency funding last year, they had to pull it from something else. Especially given the nature of what that money was for. They certainly weren't going to get any federal support on this. So it would certainly been pulled from other programs, but I don't know specifically which ones. I definitely was not something that they were going to get federal support on. To answer that one. Excuse me. So I'm going to hop over to more questions, and again, if more come, let me know. I'm sorry, I'm not reading all of the funny comments that I have come across. I probably should. I want to make sure there's time for the questions first. And I also really want to thank everyone for being kind to me. I know that this is a very, again, in the environment we're in, and there's a lot of politics and very strongly held beliefs and thoughts on this. And I'm doing my very best to keep everything super neutral and addressing the topics at hand. Not into that. My highest intention is everybody gets value out of this hour. What is the best state to live in retirement? Well, that's a whole webinar in itself. It depends. It depends on what's right for you. I'm going to be very quick on this. Maybe I'll talk longer about a future webinar. It's very individual. There's not one thing. Some people say, I want to go to the low tax state. Other people want to go to a state where the climate's a certain way. But I usually say it's cost, culture, and climate are three big considerations. But there's also where maybe you want to be close to family, right? There's a lot of factors into that. Anytime you're considering moving to a state or even an area in a state that you haven't lived before, I usually say it's a good idea to spend some time there and really get to know it. Make sure, the culture is right for you, the climate. Can't tell how many people move to states and they're like, the summer is what? The winter is what? Especially Californians, you live in this little band of weather. It's like, it's not that way in much of the country. So there's a lot of considerations that go into it. And cost is not just taxes, it's the totality of the costs. Maybe you need to be in an urban area close to medical. Maybe you like the culture of going out to restaurants a lot. Maybe you like more rural and more peace and quiet. And a lot of factors. This is a really good thing. I have a great matrix that people can use. You can use it on your own. You don't need me for it. That kind of helps you narrow down if you're thinking of moving states. The biggest reason people moving out of California really is the cost of living. And that's a big drain in retirement. The biggest reason people stay in California is the climate. right? The climate is, ideal. You don't have the extremes. So there's a lot of very considerations that go into that. So long way of saying it depends. Where's the best place to put money now? Sorry, that depends on your individual situation. Depends when you need the money, how much risk you'll take, where is the rest of your money, what is the needs of you or your family. So there's not really a right answer to that. When you kind of know what bucket it goes in, there's some really great areas like to say, where can you get the best yield on your bank savings, or what are other tax considerations and whatnot. So the answer to that one, and I don't want this to sound like a Sequoia commercial by any way, shape, or form, talk to your financial planner, talk to your professional, ideally someone who's not selling you a product, because they'll always say, here's where you put your money in my thing. And also you should really clearly understand the pros and cons to the different options. Don't go with someone says, oh, you should put it here. They don't know the first thing about your situation, your financial plan, your taxes, everything. There's a lot more that goes into that decision than just what's the hot investment. So definitely financial planning will help answer that question, at least give you the pros and cons of those decisions. I'm gonna make that one last because that's gonna take a while. When is the recession coming? Eventually. It's not in the near-term time horizon. There's some periods of time when economic data has shown a possible slowdown, and then that has reversed course. And so at this point, there is no recession in the near term. No, just don't see it. There's no indicators, barring a shock event, but there's no cyclical recession in the cards in the near term. So that's the answer to that one. Real estate investing updates. Boy, that one could take some time as well. It's a little bit of it depends as well. Are you investing in real estate as your family home? Are you investing in real estate as an investment? Are you investing in commercial real estate? Are you investing in land? There's a lot that goes into that, but all of it comes back to your individualized and personalized plan. It's a very different thought process to buying a home for your family than it is to buy something that's going to produce income for you in the future in retirement. You'd see these investments very, very differently. The other one too is, are you a cash buyer or are you a finance buyer, right, through a mortgage? Because right now in this interest rate environment, that could also involve some factors. So when you're transacting in real estate, I cannot stress enough, you should have a trifecta around you. A trifecta, 3 people. I don't care how experienced you are, it's a really good thing to have. You should have a really good qualified real estate professional that knows the market you're looking at well. So if you've always purchased, if your home purchase in California, but you're thinking of buying a retirement home, I'll just make up Nevada, you want to make sure that you get a local person that knows that market really well. You want to buy a place in New York, wherever you want someone that knows that market because they're going to be the best qualified, but a great agent and establish a relationship well in advance of the transaction so you can get super comfortable with them. Other person, people like us, financial planner. Where do you get the money? How do you optimize it? How much debt to take? How much not? That's not just a mortgage professional. You also want to have a financial planner because there's a lot of strategies outside of a mortgage that you can use to finance the purchase of a home, like securities-backed line of credit, things like that. So financial planner is really key. That financial planner will help guide you and your mortgage advisor on strategy. And the final one is your tax person. Now, your financial planner can also do a lot of your tax strategy. We do a lot of it for our clients, but we have to at least have your tax returns. We need to understand your tax picture. But tax, real estate, and the financial components and all the different ways of doing it are all going to be important, whether you're buying your primary home or for your family or an investment. I'll have all those people in there because I count how many times people said, I wish I had known before they did a transaction. And, real estate's a biggie. Let's see. How much inflation will tariff? I feel like we covered that pretty well around inflation and tariffs. So making sure I can get all the other questions answered. Our government workforce cuts, risking our safety. Why is this happening? Okay, wow, that's a little less economic, a little bit more social, but I'll maybe touch upon one element is the government hiring goes through cycles. Some administrations hire lots and lots of government workers and others cut back, and it's a cyclical thing, right? We have more, we have less. During the Biden's administration, we had a huge expansion of the government during this time. I'm not getting into the good or bad of that, I'm just saying we had a huge expansion, a lot of people hired. Under the Trump administration, at least early on, there's an idea of reducing this workforce. Cutting workers does not mean planes are going to fall out of the sky and we're not going to have any government services and all these terrible things are going to happen, because that didn't happen before 2020. So a lot of the big noisy parts of it are not necessarily true, but what is, and say, oh my gosh, if this happens, all these bad things will happen. Not necessarily. It depends who's being cut, what's being done, how things are being reorganized, and also to what things can be replaced through technology or other departments. So I don't believe it's something that's very simple to be able to look at high level and say more government good, less government bad. It's really who these people are, what are their roles, are their roles still relevant, are they redundant because of other things happening in the government. So it's also probably a matter of opinion. Some people believe in a lot of government. More government makes them feel more comfortable, more secure, better cared for. And other people feel differently. So it's a little bit of opinion line in there as well. Ultimately, we'll see. The one thing I think is really a good shift was early on with the whole Doge thing and just hack away, hack away, hack away, got replaced with kind of putting the department heads responsible for choosing who, if any, within the mandate was there. I think they're better qualified to decide rather than, people outside the government that may not really understand how these departments work, and whatnot. So hopefully that answers that. Sorry, I'm trying to go to this one. So there's a few questions here that came about immigration and policy. So I'm going to stick with economic. I know this is a really, really charged topic, and it's also one with, again, a tremendous amount of misinformation out there. And I'm going to get into that. I'll let you know a lot of things being said that actually aren't true, things that it's just, it's a lot of mess. It's a mess out there right now. So let me just talk about the economic component. Certainly the immigrant workforce. So let's just separate, and I apologize. I know these words, even these words are all charged nowadays, undocumented or illegal in relation to legal immigrants. Okay, so just categorizing these two separately for the purpose of an economic conversation. With the people that are here undocumented or illegally, if you want to classify them further, there are people that are working, obviously not legally, but they're still working in some form of capacity. They're working, and by working, they're contributing to our economy and to our society. And then there's another group, say criminals, people are not working. And again, I don't mean any of this to be charged. I'm just trying to divide it out from an economic component. So people who are working are generally, and not, and following the laws and whatnot, generally creating economically. And because over the years, we've sort of had a wink, wink, nod, nod, immigration policy, which is kind of know people are coming over here that aren't supposed to, but we need them, right? So we're going to hire them anyway and kind of just not look at it. So that's been going on for a long time. And so you have a kind of a combination of people that, took advantage of a situation for, better life for themselves and their family. And then you have people with, more nefarious ideas coming over, So the challenge to all this is that you can't easily separate this out. So there's been this kind of like wink, wink, nod, nod, everybody just come on, no background checks, no nothing. And then there's been what we have now, which is like, close it down. Everyone's kicked out that's not here legally. And unfortunately, in certain situations, people have been captured in that are here legally and had to work their way out of it. So it's sort of like a messy situation on both sides of it, right? You can see both sides of why this is happening. At the same time, it's messy. So just going into the economic component to it, the simplest solution for all of this is that everyone who comes in is vetted, and we make sure that we expand. We have a program for people that come into the country temporarily, guest worker programs. Expand those programs. We need these workers clearly. Expand those programs. Everybody has a background check. Everyone's here legally for the duration. They're not on a path to citizenship. They're here working to support their families. And then another path for people that are able to be self-sufficient and self-supported. And another path of people that we're trying to help, refugees, a crisis somewhere in the world, and vet it through and just have a solid immigration policy that both sides can agree on will prevent these types of things from happening in the future. But the swings to one direction or the other makes it very difficult. And again, I'm speaking economically as well as socially to do anything. Unfortunately, it's a little bit my personal belief. I think the challenge is both parties win on that topic. But it's a great motivator to their base on both sides for different reasons. And there hasn't really been this desire to solve the problem because it's so politically expedient not to. Unfortunately, there's human lives involved here. So I would very much like to see a better solution than any of the things we've had in recent years through multiple administrations. But on the economic front, it certainly has an impact because there are a lot of businesses that following all the laws, they're still going to have, issues, right? Because they could just have less people that are even willing to come here legally, right? It's a little bit of a more uncertain time. People that aren't, going to be much more challenging, right? Whereas in the past, it's been, again, wink, wink, nod, nod. So again, a little bit outside of my expertise, but there's just a lot of this in it. And a lot of these questions were economic about what would be the impact to businesses, what would be the impact to our society overall with the lack of workers and whatnot. And it just depends how this plays out over time. If we start becoming more structured and less messy, it will be different than if it continues to be sort of the grab bag, I guess, for lack of a better term. And also can't flip every administration. Some degree of consistency would be helpful. Whew, I covered a lot of stuff. My time is coming to an end here, so let me just make sure. I apologize, I was unable to answer the student loan question, but if you reach out to me individually, I'll give you that information. Certainly, yes, the subsidization or the government forgiveness, I should say, of student loans is coming to an end. A lot of the loans that were not forgiven but kind of pushed off are now coming due. This is going to be challenging for a lot of students that didn't have good financial practice or management or guidance on this factor of how they're going to pay for these. There are still options available, and there are still some workarounds and planning considerations, so don't feel all is lost. It's just navigating an environment where things that were postponed are now coming due. So really good plan question, and I if you reach out to me individually, I'll get you in front of Katie. She's our student loan expert. In closing for all of this, as you can see a little bit, I got a little flustered there at the end. It's because I care so deeply about all of you, and I know I can read in these questions levels of stress, levels of concern, levels of just this great uncertainty that's happening. And regardless of your political leanings, your political beliefs, each and every one of us are ultimately looking out for what's best for ourselves and our family and our society overall. While we may see this from different perspectives, that is the biggest high driver and motivator for each and every one of us. And so looking at all of this, know that there will be changes in administration, there will be policies and politicians that we agree with and disagree with, and this is going to be a constant change throughout our lives. What is most important is that we plan appropriately and properly for it. You're not trapped. You have choices, you have options. There's no situations where you don't, so figure this out. Wherever you are and whatever area is impacting your life with all of this new policy, plan for it. Don't live in fear, don't worry, don't curl up in a ball. Plan, prepare. This gives you the power to make the best decisions for you and your family. And that being said, for those of you who are clients, we're on this. We're watching this. We are looking at each of your plans, and we're making changes within your portfolios and in your financial plans in real time based on the information that comes across. For those of you who are not clients, do not hesitate to reach out with questions. You can get your questions answered. Even if you don't need to hire us now, we're happy to answer questions. We won't tell you what to invest in. We're not going to give you individual advice, but just to get you the information, the data, so you can make your best decisions, because this is what we want to do to help those that we serve. So don't hesitate to reach out with questions. We'll continue to have these webinars and updates. I'll bring in guest speakers. Our last speaker was really popular, and she did a better job with slides than I'll ever do. So also let us know what topics are of interest to you, because sometimes we'll bring in the right people to talk, and you can hear different viewpoints and different opinions on subjects that can expand even beyond the financial. That stuff's fun. So thank you very, very much to each and every one of you for your confidence, and myself and our team at Sequoia and the work that we do for you. Know that it's not just the numbers, it's also the deep caring that we have and our desire to help each and every one of you become successful. Do not hesitate to reach out at any time that you have questions. We'll be happy to answer them. For those of you that are watching this later or are going to have this recording, share this with other people. I intentionally made it in a way it should be useful to a wide audience of people, but please share it with others so they can also have their questions answered as well as we navigate the changing environment that we find ourselves in. Thank you very much for listening. Have a wonderful day. Bye for now.